All right, 3 after the hour, we're gonna get it started. Hey everybody, welcome to this webinar, which is graciously being hosted for us by IrisAgent and Palak, who is the founder and CEO. We are here to talk today about kind of cross-functional workflows between product support and engineering, the tools that people use, the processes that are in place, and we've got several great panelists here to talk with us about that. I'm your moderator, Emily Kinzig. I am a product manager at NerdWallet. I transitioned into product management from support, so I'm pretty familiar with one side of this conversation. I'm becoming very familiar with the other. And if we want to start, let's start with Palak and do a quick intro for the panelists, and then we'll get started.
Perfect. Thank you, Emily. I'm the founder and CEO of IrisAgent, which is a proactive AI solution for customer support. Before that, I was at Google, where I led product management for stateful container applications. And I just noticed how fast software releases were being enabled by the latest advancements in technologies, which was great for engineering, but created some challenges for support teams who were not always equipped to answer customer questions in a fast changing environment. So that's why I decided to solve this problem. At IrisAgent, we enable proactive customer support for product-led growth companies using contextual real-time information about products and customers. So we use AI and automation to connect engineering backend systems to frontline support and customer success teams.
Adrian, you want to go next?
Yeah. Hi, my name is Adrian. I work at ActiveCampaign. I'm the senior enablement specialist on the team. Generally, what does that mean? I wear a lot of hats. So primary function of what I do at the company is working on internal enablement for our customer org team. So I work with product managers, marketing managers, anyone who touches a release or wants to talk about a release to make sure that internally our teams are prepped and trained for new features that come out. One of the other hats that I wear is working support ops. So I work with our internal Zendesk team, support managers, other directors on what kind of tooling systems we use, how can we effectively use what kind of data we're seeing from customers come in from our tickets to drive new releases or updates to features, and all that jazz. So that's me.
Well, I guess I can jump in here. I'm Bryce Vernon. I'm from Zapier. We try to make you happier. And so if you don't know about Zapier, we are an integration automation platform. So we've got like 5,000 plus different apps that we integrate with. So somehow I try to help our team support all of that. And so it's pretty wild, but it's a lot of fun. So that's what I do kind of day to day, but I also lead a project where we're taking all the support tickets we do receive inbound through Zendesk, and we categorize them and surface all those insights to the engineering, product, and design teams, and sort of keep that feedback loop open and provide that voice of the customer. So that's where I run Point. And yeah, so that's a little bit about me. Also from Nashville, Tennessee. So it's good to be here.
Nice. The first kind of thing that I want to talk about with y'all, and we've already touched on this a little bit in your intros as it happens, but sort of your approach to support ops. And Bryce, maybe as part of your answer, you could expand a little bit on the work that you're doing, like how you're both categorizing and then surfacing that information to product teams.
Yeah, for sure. So I mean, at Zapier, we do have a dedicated support operations team that runs in conjunction with our support team. So they're dedicated to supporting support. So we work very closely with them to implement, changes we need in Zendesk. And that team is gonna, it's made up of like product managers, engineers, and then, quality and training and all that good stuff too. But yeah, they basically make the dream happen. And so we need them. But yeah, I don't know. Can't remember if there's any other part to that question, but that's more or less how it works at Zapier.
Nice. Adrian, you want to hop in next, and then Palak, I have some pointed questions for you.
Ooh. Yeah, generally for like how we're approaching support ops is just making sure that we're working in the background and creating those processes and like making sure, and I know there's like pros and cons about processes, right? Like you're like, I hate processes because they take forever, but then you have no process and it's just pure chaos. So it's really creating like order in the background, but also keeping in mind, like for our frontline support specialists, like how many buttons am I making you click for something to happen? Or do you have to do it outside of Zendesk? We use Zendesk for our ticketing system, or if you have to do in something else, like how many Google Forms is too many Google Forms? And keeping in mind that we're making something that's going to impact our customers, but our first customer is going to be our internal like users, like our employees, our coworkers.
Nice. So Palak, maybe you could touch a little bit on support ops and your approaches in the past and loop into that a little bit more. You touched on this in your interview or your introduction as well, but expand a little bit further on sort of how you developed IrisAgent and then how IrisAgent can works to support teams. Your sort of support ops for all of us.
Yeah, thanks for that question and love the ideas so far. So the way we look at support ops is, and I'm sure everyone also has, some experience with it, is it's a platform that provides tools and technologies and processes, to Adrian's points, that help customer support teams scale better, work more efficiently. And it can start with simple things like being able to tag and categorize tickets and getting visibility into top issues, and ideally doing that as automatically as possible, because no support agent really enjoys the aspect of assigning manual tasks, to creating sophisticated workflows between different functions, cross-functionally between support, engineering, product, and success. And these workflows become even more important in the aspect of escalations and incidents, where you have an outage and actual customers are getting impacted. So what IrisAgent does is we do automated triaging of support tickets by connecting those tickets and correlating them with internal bugs in a bug tracking system like Jira, or incidents that are happening in DevOps platforms like PagerDuty or StatusPage and others, and creating workflows identifying who the owners are and then automatically notifying and responding to both customers as well as the support reps about different changes that are happening internally in the system. So yeah, when we look at support ops, we also think about all the different functions involved. So for example, customer support teams should know when bugs are impacting customers. They should be able to prioritize tickets better. Product teams should be able to know what are the top feature requests that customers are asking, or what feedback are they getting on their recent releases and features that they launched. And similarly, engineering teams need to know which bugs are critical, which are impacting customers, and how they should prioritize their backlog, as opposed to tackling the noisiest customer issue first.
I love that part of your role is informing customer support teams sometimes the bugs that engineering knows about. I know that in my past life, one way to find out about bugs was through the queue, but another way was just happening to be in the right Slack channel at the right time when it was being discussed, as opposed to somebody like proactively coming and being like, hey, over here we have this bug, y'all should know about it. So it's nice that y'all have kind of thought about that from both ends of the spectrum. Bryce, Palak was just talking about integrated systems. Y'all do tons of integrated systems. What happens if Zapier goes down? How do y'all kind of like prompt the customer support in those scenarios, and what's the cross-functional workflow that exists to handle an outage?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So yeah, I mean, automation integrations are like the heart of Zapier. And there's one concept that the team and we all kind of take into consideration is sort of creating these robots and these automations with humans at the center, and sort of keeping the humans in the loop, especially when like judgment calls need to be made, right? And so because we have sort of the humans front and center, any automation we have set up to alert us of incidents or connect the right groups of people, we always have some sort of alternative that can be manually kind of prompted or kicked off, right? And that keeps everything going. And so, in the situation with an incident, right, we do have automated systems to then put it into Slack. I mean, if Slack goes down and Zapier goes down, then we're going into Google. It's a little wild. It's happened a couple times, but very, very rare, thankfully. But yeah, Slack is definitely our central hub for all the communication. So having that streamlined process there, being able to manually kick off messages and alerts there if for whatever reason they're not. And then we've got, Slack groups and people who are like in the incident group. They're all alerted and people really rally behind that. We have very clearly defined roles that people raise their hands with reactions and fill. So yeah, the system goes pretty well, even if Zapier goes down. For us, honestly, just as an aside, like so much of our like going down is with one of the integrations or the apps that we integrate with. So a lot of times, maybe ActiveCampaign goes down, Adrian, I don't know. And a customer is like, hey, what's going on? And we sort of have to be on top of that and make sure that our customers know about that too, which is kind of an added curveball. But anyway, yeah.
Thanks. A brief aside, which is that we are planning to do Q&A, open Q&A at the end. So if you have any questions, feel free to just drop those into the Q&A. I see like a raised hand and I am unable to unraise your hand or promote you to ask a question. But if you don't mind, if you have one, just dropping it in the Q&A and we'll circle back to that. And so then redirecting back to questions, Adrian, kind of similar to what Bryce just talked about, but I'd love to hear not only your support readiness for an outage, but also the existing processes and cross-functional workflows that y'all have already, and some of your maybe favorite best practices for what's working really well for your support ops team and those cross-functional experiences, and also like outage responsiveness.
Yeah, big questions. I think the most important thing is that when you're working cross-functionally between different departments within a company, is that you have to remember the customer does not care what team you're on. The customer is just reaching out to ActiveCampaign, they're just reaching out to IrisAgent, they're just reaching out to Zapier. They're just like, your company is causing me a headache on X, Y, and Z. And keeping that in mind is really important because depending on your job day to day, you just might forget that because you get stuck in the details and you're like, oh, I have to wait for this team, or I'm waiting for this team to approve something, things like that. So starting really at the top of just like keeping that mindset of like, you're all on one team and you're trying to make the best customer experience you could possibly make given your resources. So what that comes down to is that, of course, we have to have processes of escalating. What if we get a report on frontline support and they can't solve it? And ideally, I would love for everyone to solve it on frontline because then we don't have to have any processes. But if they can't solve it, what does that process or workflow look like to escalate it to another team? We have another team that creates the JIRAs for our engineering team. So how do we get from a frontline ticket all the way to a JIRA? And how do we make sure that those JIRAs are taken care of and that the responses go back to the Zendesk ticket? These are all processes that we have to make, and it comes down to the agreement of like, we want to help our customers. We can't just make a ticket and kind of let it live, an orphan ticket somewhere hanging out by itself, and you never get back to the customer. That's terrible. You would never want that. So keeping that in mind, coming together with different leaders of different teams and being like, okay, how do we streamline this better? And what team is going to be responsible for what part of that process? Once that agreement comes into play, it goes much better. Obviously, there are bumps, there are hiccups, things get lost. We didn't account for exceptional workflow where something goes awry. That happens, and it's really just, it comes down to one of our core tenets at Active Campaigns, like iterate always. So we're always iterating on our processes, on our workflows to make it better. And sometimes it comes down to like our frontline agents are like, this is a terrible workflow. It's really impeding our accuracy, how fast we're working, and it's just annoying. And we're like, noted. How do we fix this so that it's not terrible for you day to day, because it's going to affect them the most. And then for the other part of like, how do we kind of prep for outages? It's very interesting because Emily, like you were saying, we can see bugs coming in when our queue starts to inflate. Like we're running chat normally, and then all of a sudden chat just goes up and you're like, something is not working, clearly. So we will start grabbing all those, tagging those, and start flagging those as high priority tickets to our engineering teams. And there's a process in place internally for that. As to how the support team gets ready is just that we have to accept that we are a software. Things happen in software all the time. Software is not without bugs. If there weren't bugs, half of us wouldn't have a job. And it's something you accept, and we have processes. It's like you report it, this is where it goes. That team is always standing by. If we get enough of those reports, we have a whole process that kicks off internally, and we're like, bad things are happening, please, we have to fix this for the customer.
I love that y'all have like a lot of processes in place. I love that you mentioned that there's a team that's responsible sort of for creating Jira tickets. How do y'all avoid a Jira black hole? How do you avoid, like, does the team that creates the Jira tickets also manage some level of ownership over watching that ticket as it progresses through an engineering flow? Do y'all have engineers who are tasked with ensuring that part of marking a ticket is done is circling back? How does that how do y'all resolve the potential for just like escalation and disappear?
Yeah, so the one team makes the Jira, and then it goes onto our defects boards in Jira, and that's where the engineering team takes over. Now, product management and engineering teams have taken the promise to scope in bug time. So there's always a developer or a couple, it depends on the team, who are on bug duty for that week, 2 weeks, depends on their rotation. So when those issues go up to their queue, that's what they're responsible for working on. And it's also part of their responsibility to push comments back through the Zendesk ticket. So there's an integration between Jira and Zendesk where you can push that comment back so that it's going to go back to the support team so that they can update the client or ask for more information, what have you, to keep that going. So our product teams have accepted that responsibility, that they manage those defect queues. And our executive leadership team also looks at that data. They're like, how many tickets have we gotten on this product? How many have made it into Jira's? Why do we have so many? And what's the cost of having this many tickets and bugs?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And that sounds like a really good workflow. Palak, IrisAgent is really looking at breaking those silos. And as Adrian just pointed out, like, customers don't care what team you're on. Customers don't care what your role is at the company. They just want you to hear them, and they want to feel heard. So can you talk a little bit about how some of the current IrisAgent customers are using cross-functional workflows and IrisAgent to break those silos and kind of really ensure that cross-functional flow of communication?
Yeah, absolutely. I love the response, and also this Jira black hole that often happens where you escalate something into engineering and we don't have any idea of what the status is, when is it getting resolved, what is the business impact. So what IrisAgent does is we connect all your siloed data platforms, be it your sales CRM like Salesforce, ticketing systems, CSM systems, engineering, and product management tools. And what that enables is, if you have a defect dashboard or a bug dashboard, engineering can actually know which of those bugs are the most urgent and highest priority based on how much revenue is at stake. And also, it's also important for product management to get that feedback. If you recently launched a new release, how many product managers really know what was the business impact? What is the Pareto principle saying? Which features are causing the most number of issues and the most amount of customer happiness? So a simple example is, if there is a bug in the system because of a recent release and say 10 support tickets came in, typically support agents would not know what is the root cause of those tickets, and they would usually just send 10 escalations to engineering and without any understanding of why they happen. Is it connected to some recent changes? So what IrisAgent does is it does AI-based correlation between support issues and internal bugs and releases, and creates workflows so that every stakeholder in the journey is fully aware of what's happening, what is the business impact, and finally closing the loop back with the customer automatically. If the issue gets resolved, we want to notify the customer as early as possible that this has been updated.
Nice. I had like a whole thread and I was gonna really pull on it and toss it to Bryce, and this was gonna go smoothly, but if you have insights, I want to hear them, and I also want to hear from you kind of to the support agents may not know, like how informed your agents are about product release cycles and issues, but also any feedback you have on the notes that Plak just had.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I think the reality is that the ticket black hole, I don't think will ever go away because we don't have unlimited resources to go fix all the bugs, right? And I think as a support team, it's so helpful when, of course, your product teams have focus and clarity, because the reality is as a software platform, you are not going to be able to make everyone happy. So given the business impact of bugs, you take that into consideration, but then with a very focused product strategy, you can begin to say actually, no, we're actually never going to really fix those bugs, and be totally okay with the black hole, right? You just want the black hole in the right spot, obviously. So that's where product and support is so important to be aligned, right? Because if support's gosh, why aren't we fixing it? The reality is we have limited resources. Prioritization is one of the hardest things for anyone, in any role, right? So I think that's a big piece of it. And kind of to go to your next question, Emily, just about keeping the agents informed and closely aligned with product, right? That's something at Zapier, we've been remote since we started back in 2011, I think it was. Okay. And so it's always been remote. And so we've had to rely so heavily on asynchronous communication and the written word. That has been so important. So we've always had a culture of just reading and publishing and transparency there that has been fundamental. But inevitably, we've grown so much since then. And we realized okay, now there's so much to read. There's just too much to read, right? So we just actually launched this new product enablement meeting that's going to happen every month. We literally just had our first one because everything's just been async for so long, but we've had this first meeting that's recording, and the PMs all jump in and they give their 4 to 5 minutes. This is what's coming. This is what you need to know. Here's the quick demo if you need to do it. And they just move to the next PM, and we just do this sort of round robin situation. And so that, of course, has the and if you want to learn more, here's where you go to read, here's where the team is, and all that good stuff. So it's honestly, it's a muscle at Zapier that we're shifting, where we're flexing that and learning. So that's that's where it kind of sits right now.
Nice. Adrian, I'd love to hear your response to that question too. And kind of as a corollary, touching on something Bryce mentioned, product strategy and the prioritization is so critical to product and engineering work, but sometimes I think it forgets to get filtered down to support agents so that they have that bigger business picture understanding of why something isn't going to get fixed. So I'm curious to know if your agents are both well informed about product release cycle, but also do you feel that y'all do a good job of helping them understand the sort of prioritization decision matrix that goes into play. Because when you see a ticket in the black hole for years and you're like, oh, wow, that was ours, it can feel a little demoralizing if you don't have context in which to place it.
Yeah, 100%. It's always something that is difficult, and we try our best to be proactive about giving the why behind a decision. But sometimes decisions are just rapidly made and we have to backtrack with why to give context. But you kind of have to remember, what kind of people are you hiring? Typically, if you're hiring for a support role, especially in a technical support role, they're usually driven by curiosity. They want to know why something works this way, how it works, how do I make a workaround so that it works for the customer. They're just naturally curious. Like, that is a top attribute we're looking for, right? So when a bug that goes into the Jira black hole doesn't come back out with a resolution, there's a lot of questions of why. And usually that comes down to a breakdown, like Bryce was mentioning, where we just don't have enough resources at the time, or the larger product strategies to go in a different direction. And that is the top company priority. Therefore, resources are all getting directed there. Putting that into context. What I always push for each department is that after you have that H1, Q1, whatever timeline acronym you want to use for that whole company all hands, where you go over those high level, your ARs, your SLAs, whatever, pick an acronym, whatever your top company goals are. The question is okay, I work here. How does that affect me? How does that affect my day-to-day? And I always push to have our leadership teams narrow that scope down. Okay, this is our company goal. And now, because this is our big company goal, this is our team's goal, so that it feeds into this bigger one. And how does that affect you on your day-to-day? It maybe means that this process is going to change. We're going to create something new, whatever, to feed into that goal. Giving people context is really what's going to have people buy in, right? Because you want to bring your company into a different direction or achieve a bigger goal, you have to have your employees buy in to what you're trying to achieve. So giving that context. And I completely forgot the other question. So if we have it again, that'd be great.
Well, we're gonna tweak it a little bit and open the floor up to all three of y'all. Kind of generally speaking, on a scale of 1 to 10, how educated are support people on your product, changing product issues, and then that product release cycle and issues where it kind of comes into play? Palak, you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. I mean, so that is our bread and butter. That's what our platform specializes in. So I would hope it's closer to 10 or 9. We have a product dashboard, not just for product teams, but also for support teams, where they can see the availability of different services, all the top high impact bugs based on the business impact, as well as the impact of how they're impacting the entire service. And, even if there is a bug which has a few customers reporting on it, but if it has a potential to really explode, then engineering has to take a look at it, and giving the right information to the support teams as well about what issues are impacting customers.
Nice. Bryce?
Yeah, it's moving in the right direction. Probably a 6 or a 7, if I'm being optimistic. want to make it much higher. Promise. So yeah, I think we really rely on our support team's ability to search. They're excellent searchers. They have to be. So we have, again, right, we've got those 5,000 integrations. Each one of those integrations has its own set of bugs. And so they have to diagnose the bug with the integration and go find it in the sea of bugs. So searching Zendesk for past tickets is the best shortcut ever, right? Or Slack, where people are asking questions. And then we've got that database of all the bugs for them to search. So I would say they're less fully educated on what's going on, and they're just equipped to go search. There's no other way around it for us. And so that's what I'd say.
Nice. Adrian.
Yeah, so I'm going to tackle it from like how our teams are aware of like new features that are coming out. So that is one of the main hats I wear, and we rely heavily on Slack. That's how we communicate and chat with everyone. A lot of our knowledge lives in there, for better or for worse. That's where people are looking while they're running Zendesk and working with customers. So I would say on a scale, as the person who creates all the training for new features, would love it to be a 10. However, I'm fully aware that it's not a 10, likely around a 7. So we do kind of a combo, depending on customer impact and priority of the new feature will depend on what kind of training is created. So let's say it's a tier 1, things are really changing, new feature, pizzazz, press release happening. That's a tier 1 feature. That's going to get a full training course that we run through an LMS platform. And all of the frontline teams get an hour every 2 weeks, because we got to spread it around globally to do trainings related to feature releases. So tier 1, that's going to get its full training. There'll be a demo component in there. All of our trainings have a survey component at the end where we basically score for CSAT of like, do you like this training? Was it good? Did you have a fun time? But then we break it down into each different components of like, was this section helpful? This one, and then there's open form at the end. So that's how we're collecting feedback that way, but also it's open so that I can push any product questions to the product team, and I facilitate receiving, sometimes pulling those answers back. So our teams are going to have that. So we do it with training courses, but then we also utilize Slack and like the group user ats. So not an at here, but at specific teams. We operate globally, so we have them per region. So if it's AMER, EMEA, LATAM, APAC, depending on the time zones, because I don't need to alert everyone because not everyone is awake. We will tag those teams when a new feature has been pushed into production and is live for our customers. And then all of these new features have internal knowledge base help documents. So those pair with our external ones. The internal ones have a little bit more of those technical details on it. The just in case, like, all right, what if someone does report a bug on this? What do I check? Is there any special process for this feature? So generally, we're doing our best to give our teams what they need to either answer their questions about a new feature or how to triage bugs that are coming in for a new feature.
Nice. Robust documentation is like my favorite phrase in the whole wide world.
I know.
Love that.
I do too.
I feel like you could almost do like a whole training just on like a whole webinar just on like learning, development, training, and documentation, because it sounds like y'all have it really dialed in. Like, very nice. Conversely, now based like another scale of 1 to 10 with a sidebar question. How educated do you think your product and engineering teams are on the most common support complaints? And then how do you capture feedback from customer communications? We can kind of split this up if we need to, but like, how do you capture that feedback, which Bryce, I know you mentioned is a big initiative of yours. So how educated do you think they are on support issues? And how are you capturing common feedback from customer communications to facilitate sharing that information and educating your product and engineering teams? And Bryce, since you're working on that day to day, why don't you start us off?
Yeah, no, for sure. So, I mean, I think there's two big categories that we see this through. Like, one is certainly issues like bugs that are going on. And one is like a UX situation or just something that just needs to be improved. And that's sort of what we call, the standard like feature request or UX product feedback. And so both of them have their systems that they go off to. One's in Jira and one's captured. We use Product Board for that. And so I feel like especially this year, it's been, if I had to rate this on 1 to 10, like it'd be like a 7. Like I feel like we've gotten a really good motion going for those teams to understand what's the common issues and bubbling up the data there. But even then, and like I said, that's such a big project for me, is looking at all that data, like why are customers reaching out to us, servicing, what will direct the roadmap, but also, looking into like the themes and insights that might just go under the radar a little bit. It's interesting that even with the data, it's still so important for someone to dive in and surface those themes and things that you just take a little bit more closeness with the data to surface. And there's really nothing like someone just like sitting in on a product call that's from support, right? And understanding who they are, where they're at, where they're going, and being able to just like plant a seed in certain situations. As much as we want just data, like there's still such power in that. So yeah, but I mean, at the bottom of this, the foundation, like our systems, like with Jira and Product Board, I think do an excellent job of surfacing what we can with the data that we have. So I'd say that's going pretty well.
Thanks. There's something like having those embedded support people in every product team so that they can sit on those like grooming calls or sprint planning calls. My favorite experiences were when an engineer would just like call me out and I would kind of get busted for not paying close enough attention because it wasn't my team. But then I realized that they needed my insight on a ticket. And you're like, oh, from a support perspective, yes, I think this ticket sounds good. And I have one tweak, and then they would make it. And you're like, oh, that had a huge impact, like long term. And me being in a 45-minute meeting wasn't a waste of time. Like that was a big help.
Totally.
Yeah. Adrian, I'd love to hear your take on this, and then Polak will wrap up the question part with you and then move into open Q&A.
Yeah, we actually have a similar process to what Bryce is working on, where our frontline agents are required to categorize tickets that they run into. Now, they do their best because nobody goes in and they're like, I have one question for support. It's always like, I have one initial question, and then things might deviate from there. So categorizing based on like, what was the bulk of that interaction, but getting information that way of like, hey, what does our volume breakdown look like, is really good data that we're starting to feed back to product, because they can start cross-referencing that information with how many Jira tickets are getting created per product feature. And then what we also have that we're really lucky to have is a team that runs our NPS for our customers. So we run NPS surveys for customers, and we have a team that's dedicated to creating the voice of a customer report that comes out quarterly. That information is purely based on NPS scores, and it's both numbers and like comments, feedback, additional surveys, conversations of like, cool, you said you really love this feature. Can you tell us more? Did you like the new features that came out for that? Or, oh, you really don't like this feature. How can we improve it? What's something you're looking into? And all of this data feeds into just general product strategy of like, okay, obviously we need to address some of the things that our customers are bringing. Does this align with what the company would like to see in the next year in terms of whatever roadmap happens, and kind of pulling in that data? But at the same time, if we're receiving like hundreds of reports or requests for some sort of update, like that's like a big flag, right? We're like, we should probably look into this. Maybe chat with specific customers and be like, all right, tell me why you don't like this. What do you need for this to work? What integration do you need us to build? So maybe you don't have to use Zapier or things of that nature.
Right.
Nice. Polak, why don't we wrap it up with you? I'd love to hear a little bit more about how your product and engineering teams understand common support issues. And then if you just want to give us like a couple of sort of success stories of how IrisAgent has sort of served to support better educating all functions at a company, and give a little insight into how people might get started using your product or a similar one, that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So this is a big focus area for us. Like support tickets have information which can be gold for product and engineering teams. This is where we really rely a lot on automatic tagging. And to Adrian's point, a conversation cannot be only about one thing. It can have multiple things. It's very important to define the right taxonomy and hierarchies when you're streamlining your support tagging process. So which means having tags which are around product areas and sub areas, as well as what is the reason of contact? Was it a feature request? Was it a bug, performance issue, or the simple how-to question? Machine learning has advanced quite a bit to very accurately get those tags and categories out of tickets automatically. And it's also important to correlate that with customer health signals, things like CSAT scores, NPS, and sentiment scores. The way customers ask a question or describe their problem also tells a lot about how unhappy or happy they are with the service. So we do sentiment analysis on tickets to really understand and drill down on the data around in which product areas and bugs and releases are you seeing the most negative and positive sentiments, and what is the reason for that. So yeah, I mean, there's a ton of data available. It's about figuring out what is the signal from the noise and making sure that you have the right processes and workflows to notify the stakeholders in real time so that they can influence the product roadmap and keep the customers happy. You've seen pretty good success with a lot of our customers, mostly in the software businesses, both in the US and Europe, around being able to automate tag, automate tagging, correlate support tickets with internal bugs, get dashboards and reporting around what is working well, what's not working well. Yeah, I mean, and if anybody wants to get started, please just send me a note at palak@irisagent.com, and we'll get you up and running in less than 72 hours.
Nice. Oh, that's so speedy quick. That's the kind of implementation time most people dream of. Palak is also in the support-driven Slack, and she's not going to spam you, but you can definitely ask her for questions. So now we have 4 Q&A questions that have come in while we were chatting. Aaron wants to know a little bit more about best practice workflows between customer support and product for bug reports, feature requests, updates, internal product and feature testing. Maybe do you all have any examples of customer support assisting the product on feature testing? And are there times where there's like post-mortem reviews or hardware issues that customer service can then assist engineering? I know we've done some like big picture kind of things, but if y'all have any sort of more concrete examples, I think that might fit into what they're asking.
Yeah, I can take part of this. So Aaron, you mentioned internal product feature testing. So one of the cool things that we've started doing this year is implementing bug bashes. So working with product ops and myself for support and success side of creating bug bashes that have usually some sort of monetary reward, really gets that motivation going, of a new feature. So we'll have, sorry, Emily, we'll have some sort of new feature that we're essentially beta testing. And it's kind of like, can you break this feature? Can you think of like the weirdest ways or the most unique ways that customers can use this? And pulling people who are in support, who are in success, who are having those daily conversations with our customers, like they're the ones in it all day, every day. They're going to be able to know that like, this isn't going to work, or like, this is a weird interaction of having to click through this menu and then this to like pull something out. So having those bug bashes being open to the entire company, no matter like what your department is, has really been honestly quite fun. And because you're kind of competing with coworkers of like, how many bugs, like valid bugs, validation happens. How many valid bugs have you found? There's a prize for that. What was the most complex bug? That's a prize for that too. To really just kind of push for what kind of testing and really getting it into like human hands, because you can do a bunch of automated testing, but sometimes the human brain thinks of really fun ways of how to use a platform.
Love that. Yeah, I'm like looking at your question, Aaron, and just thinking about what specifically I can answer or help with, because there's a lot there. But I mean, I do think, for us, one of our values at Zapier is build the robot, don't be the robot. So we're using our product all the time. And so any new feature or product that's going to come out, like it will be directly applicable to what we're doing each and every day. So they, in our, just very practically, in our support Slack channel at the very top, it's like we have two little options. One's like tell support and one's ask support. And so they link to different forms. One is like tell support, and that's for like product updates, anything you want the support team to know, and they get a note, like a digest every Monday of that. And then one's ask support. And so part of that, product managers will go in there and ask support for internal alpha or beta testers, if new products or features, and get like what we call a working group, right, set up in Slack, and they will all jump in there and try to take, a lot of times you can take what we already have built ourselves, right, and just translate it with this new feature or this new product and see what it looks like. So yeah, hopefully that helps a little bit. There's so many best practices and workflows, I think, between customer support and product engineering. Maybe I'd need a little bit more specificity there to answer, but hopefully that helps.
Great. Palak, you have any insights?
I think we covered most of the things. I think I will just re-emphasize that having a dashboard for product teams to know what top feature requests are coming from support tickets, say every week, every month, as well as knowing which bugs have the highest impact and priority based on number of customers impacted, amount of revenue at risk, support tickets that are coming in, sentiment of customers as it has been trending because of those issues, and just having real-time updates and notifications to different stakeholders, because often what happens is, even if a support agent is on a linked Jira issue, they might not even know that the Jira issue has been deprioritized or it's changing assignees, and there's no real point of contact on that. So just keeping everybody in the loop, and then finally, which ensures that customers are also in the loop.
Thanks. I'm going to kind of combine the next two questions because I think that there's a way that they can sort of be corollaries to one another. Are y'all transparent with customers for bugs that won't be fixed, or also perhaps feature requests that won't be implemented? And when y'all have received the kind of messaging from product engineering that something isn't a priority, are you ever in a position to kind of help product make better decisions on prioritization if something just comes in repetitively and is a regular either feature request or bug? I think that should sort of touch on what both Brooke and Yadin are asking, and help us, because we are coming to 10 minutes before the hour, and I'm sure many of y'all have another meeting to jump to after this. So if y'all want to speak to that real quickly, and then we can touch on Marcel's question real quick.
Cool. And I can jump in first, Adrian. So at the moment, we are not fully transparent about the bugs that will not be fixed or the bugs in their priority. Again, so many of the bugs are actually dependent on the third-party app for us and the third-party integration. So just about every single integration has a development team dedicated to working on their Zapier integration. So we just let them know. And they're actually the ones that prioritize it, which is a really kind of weird support situation where we don't want to say like, hey, it's them, it's not us, but it is kind of, it's them, it's not us. And so that can be a little tricky wording that. But we definitely have thought about opening up feature requests and getting those transparent. We do have a Zapier community where that's like our first step in that direction, where people can suggest ideas, and that's very transparent, and we might weigh in there. So yeah, that's, I guess, the first sort of part of it. And as far as like helping product teams prioritize, that is where like I do that monthly reporting, looking at all the data, and I do surface sort of the top 3 reoccurring themes and maybe specifics underneath those themes for product teams to take into consideration, sort of as like another variable in their way to weight the different fixes. And so that is something that we do that can help there, just as an added layer of insight that I can provide to their teams. So
Yeah, transparency about bugs that will or will not be fixed is always just a tricky situation to be in, because like most of the time you are not literally the person who's fixing the bug. So like you have very little control over if and when that bug's going to get fixed. I always coach on like as much transparency as possible in like the kindest way. You can't just be like, no, we're never fixing this. This is just not going to happen. Like that's not a good response to give to a customer. Again, like giving context to internal teams, give context to the customer. Like, hey, right now it's just not one of our current team's priorities. We'll keep it like on the backlog for now, but this is current expected behavior of X, Y, and Z. Because we can't keep tickets open forever. That'd be terrible for reporting and SLAs, but also it's just not time for anyone. So you just kind of have to decide like if your company, like what level of transparency your company's at, and then how that affects your answers as well. In terms of prioritizing, we have a ideas portal. It's literally ideas.activecampaign.com, where all of our customers can put up ideas, feature requests that they would like to see on the platform, and you can upvote or downvote them. All the product managers look at every submission that goes in, but as a company, we look at the top 10 most upvoted ideas to see, hey, is there a way we can get us to a place to maybe implement this change? Or like, what would it look like if we had this in our platform? And does that work for business goals? Like how, like trying to do what our customers wanted to do, but also like, if like our CEO, Jason, has like a grand plan of bringing us somewhere in 10 years, is adding this feature going to bring us there in 10 years? So those are also things that we look at specifically for Jira, prioritization of P01, etc. The engineering teams have their own set of guidelines for that on the back end. I don't know the specifics on that, but at our company, the EMs are managing that prioritization.
Nice.
Yeah, that's a pretty interesting topic. Sometimes teams might not be able to share internal details of Jira bugs because this might involve proprietary information. I really love the concept of status pages and using them more actively and having a workflow which can push whatever is publicly shareable on those status pages in real time and directing customers to them. And to the second point, I would say, yeah, I think when customers are asking for feature requests, which are not on the horizon, it's always good to let them know that this is something we can't tackle, and maybe give some rough estimates of when it might be possible or why not it is feasible to launch something like that.
Thanks. You cut out for a minute there, but I think we got the gist, which was like status pages are a great way to provide visibility. And I think that Bryce and Adrian, you both touched on something that I find so important, which is that customers may ask for something in a way that isn't necessarily tied to the company goals, or it's very precise. So when you can surface things as a theme rather than like a direct request, and when you can find the does it fit, I think that can really help with that like prioritization from a product perspective. Like, here's how this fits into company goals. We're not telling you exactly what to build. Here's sort of the thematic element of what a customer is trying to achieve versus what they directly think they want. In the last like couple of minutes, do y'all use knowledge-centered service best practices for collecting and sharing knowledge around new issues? That is from Marcel. I don't know much about KCS. I should, but I don't. So have at it.
We use part of KCS is what I can tell you right now. So we use the linking and flagging parts of KCS to help our author groups just know what's going on in our internal knowledge base, because as companies start to grow, as your support team starts to grow, whatever team it is, your internal knowledge base will sometimes start resembling a graveyard, and you have to make sure that you have some sort of process in place of making sure things are up to date, things are correct, who's making new ones. So all of our frontline support agents, we've built it into Zendesk. They can flag articles and then they submit the feedback directly in Zendesk, makes a separate ticket and goes over to our content team. And then we handle whatever comes in from there. And then we actually have linking articles, whether it's in our internal or external help center, to tickets as a metric that we look at on our quality scorecards, because it's really important that we're teaching our teams to search what we have already. Again, Bryce touched on reading and searching. It's also a very big component of the job. And so we look at linking metrics, because if it isn't something that's in our external or internal, we should probably make an article on that. So we use parts of KCS there.
No comment from me because we have a documentation team and they know, so I have no idea.
Nice. Palak, are y'all KCS centered?
A little bit. We are on the journey, but I would again point to AI and just using AI to find the right knowledge article across so many different sources, be it internal Slack messages or documentation or help centers.
Nice. And then Angelique, sliding in right as we are really coming to a close, but do y'all have any guidelines for notifying people when something's been resolved, especially like when something was kind of maybe many user impacts, you can't like respond to each person individually. Do you have a dashboard? Do you have support reach out? What's real fast? What's the TLDR and how you update folks?
Update the status page, and any linked tickets are linked to a main ticket in Zendesk, and they get a mass resolved response.
+1.
+1,
Yep.
absolutely.
Thanks everybody for being here. Again, I think Palak has a solution for easily notifying customers en masse for resolved bugs. So if you're interested in hearing how that solution can work for you and also break down so many other silos, you can reach out to her, PALAK, at IrisAgent.com or visit IrisAgent.com for more. If you came from Support Driven, we'll see you on the Slack. If you've never heard of Support Driven, it's supportdriven.com. Thanks, y'all.
Thanks a lot,
Thanks,
Emily.
Emily. Appreciate it.
Bye.
Bye, y'all.